My name is Victoria Ashford, and I live in one of those pristine neighborhoods in Greenwich, Connecticut, where the hedges are always trimmed and the secrets are always buried deep. My husband, James, is a hedge fund manager at one of those firms that makes obscene amounts of money doing things I've never fully understood, and honestly, I stopped trying to understand a long time ago. We have two kids, Olivia, who's 14, and Chase, who's 12, both enrolled in private schools that cost more than most people's annual salaries. From the outside, we're the perfect family. From the inside, we've been strangers living under the same roof for the past 3 years. It started innocently enough, or at least that's what I tell myself when the guilt creeps in during those late nights when I can't sleep. I was scrolling through Instagram one evening last spring, glass of Chardonnay in hand, watching all these influencers with their perfect lives and their perfect bodies and their perfect everything. James was in his study, probably on his third scotch, having another video call with Tokyo or Singapore or wherever the hell his attention was these days. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet except for the ambient music playing through our whole home sound system, and I was just so desperately bored. That's when I saw an ad for this AI image generation service that could create hyper-realistic portraits. I'd been hearing about AI and deepfakes and all that tech stuff, mostly from my sister Rebecca, who works in digital marketing in Manhattan, but I'd never really paid attention until that moment. I clicked on the link just out of curiosity. The website was sleek, professional, promising to create photorealistic images of people who didn't exist. There were examples scattered across the page, faces so real you'd swear you'd seen them at Whole Foods or sitting at the bar at some upscale restaurant in the city. I thought about it for maybe 10 minutes before I signed up for the premium service. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have some grand scheme cooking in my mind. I was just a bored housewife with too much time and too much disposable income, which is probably how half the trouble in this world starts anyway. I spent the next week generating different faces, tweaking parameters, adjusting features, until I created her, Isabelle Laurent. God, even the name just came to me like it was meant to be. She was stunning in that effortless way that makes other women hate you, with long, dark hair that caught the light perfectly, green eyes that seemed to see right through the camera, high cheekbones, full lips, the kind of face that launched 1,000 ships, or at least 1,000 likes. I gave her a backstory because that's what you do when you create a person from nothing. She was a fashion photographer based in Los Angeles, traveled constantly for work, shot for Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, lived in a loft in the Arts District. I pulled images from stock photo sites, ran them through the AI to put Isabel's face on them, created this entire portfolio of a life that didn't exist. The account blew up faster than I expected. I posted 3 times a week, always captioning in this breezy, confident tone that I honestly wished I had in real life. Photos of Isabel at gallery openings, Isabel drinking oat milk lattes in minimalist cafes, Isabel on rooftops at sunset with downtown LA spreading out behind her like a promise. Within 2 months, she had 70,000 followers. Within 3, she had brand deals coming in. I turned them all down, obviously, because I wasn't trying to commit fraud, just create something beautiful and fake and mine. Comments flooded in from men and women alike. Gorgeous, wife material, where have you been all my life? It was intoxicating in a way I hadn't felt in years. James barely noticed I was spending so much time on my phone. That should have been my first clue about how bad things had gotten between us, but I was too caught up in my little experiment to care. Then, one night in late July, we were having dinner at this new farm-to-table place in Westport with another couple, Derek and Simone Harrison. Derek works with James, and Simone does something with interior design that she never stops talking about. The conversation had died one of those awkward deaths that happen when nobody really wants to be there, and Derek pulled out his phone to show us something. He started scrolling through Instagram, and I watched his thumb move down the screen until it stopped on a photo I recognized immediately. It was Isabel, standing on a beach at golden hour, the ocean behind her, wearing a white linen dress that the AI had rendered so perfectly you could almost feel the fabric.
"Okay, who is this absolute smoke show?" Derek said, and Simone slapped his arm playfully, but she was looking too, curious. "Been seeing her all over my Explore page lately. Isabel's something. She's everywhere." My heart was pounding so hard I thought they might hear it across the table. James leaned over to look, and I watched his face change. It was subtle, just a small shift in his expression, but I'd been married to him for 16 years, and I knew every micro-expression he had. Interest, that's what I saw. Genuine, unfiltered interest. "She's pretty," James said, his tone carefully neutral, but his eyes stayed on the screen a beat too long. "Photographer, right? I think I've seen her work." "You haven't seen her work," I said, taking a sip of my wine to keep my hands busy. "She's not that famous." "How do you know?" James asked, and there was something in his voice I couldn't quite place. "Lucky guess," I said. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't stop thinking about the look on James's face. That night, after we got home and the kids were asleep and James was in the shower, I did something I'm not proud of. I opened his phone. I knew his passcode because we'd always had this unspoken rule about transparency, which was ironic given what I'd been doing. I opened Instagram and went to his search history. Isabelle Laurent was right there at the top. He'd searched for her account. He'd looked through her photos. He hadn't followed her yet, but it was only a matter of time. I should have stopped right there. I should have deleted the account, confessed the whole stupid thing, laughed it off as a weird phase. But something inside me, something dark and curious, and maybe a little cruel, wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted to know if my husband, the man who barely looked at me anymore, the man who forgot our anniversary 3 years running, the man who spent more time managing other people's money than managing his own family, would actually fall for a woman that didn't exist. So I made the decision. I would message him, just to see what he would do, just to test the waters of his loyalty or lack thereof. I told myself it was justified, that I deserved to know the truth about who I'd married, but deep down I knew I was looking for a reason to burn it all down.
I waited 3 days before I had Isabel follow James's account. He followed back within an hour. 2 days after that, I had Isabel send him a direct message. I kept it simple, professional. "Hi, James. I noticed you work in finance. I'm actually looking for some investment advice for a project I'm working on. Would you be open to chatting? No pressure." I added a smiley face emoji because that's what women like Isabel would do. He responded in 20 minutes. "Happy to help. What kind of project are you working on?" And just like that, the trap was set. We messaged back and forth for a week, always keeping it professional at first. I had Isabel ask smart questions about investment portfolios and asset allocation, things I'd picked up from 16 years of half listening to James talk about his work. He was helpful, almost eager to share his expertise, and I could sense him getting more comfortable with each exchange. Then I started adding little personal details. Isabel mentioned she was tired from a photo shoot in Joshua Tree. She said she'd had a rough breakup 6 months ago and was focusing on her career. She asked James about his life, and he told her he was married with 2 kids, but that things were complicated. Things were complicated. That's what he told the stranger on the internet, while I was downstairs making dinner for those 2 kids, while I was scheduling their orthodontist appointments and their SAT prep courses and their piano lessons. Things were complicated. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but instead I took a deep breath and kept playing the role. Isabel was sympathetic. She told James she understood that relationships were hard and that she admired people who tried to make things work. She was perfect, understanding without being pushy, interested without being desperate. Everything I apparently wasn't anymore. August turned into September, and the messages got more frequent. James started texting Isabel during the day, during his lunch breaks, late at night after I'd gone to bed. I know because I'd lie there in the dark, phone in hand, watching the messages come through, crafting responses that were flirty enough to keep him interested, but not so forward that he'd get scared off. It was exhausting and exhilarating and completely insane. I was catfishing my own husband, and he had no idea. One night in mid-September, James came home late from the office, which wasn't unusual, but there was something different about him. He was lighter somehow, smiling more,
And when I asked him about his day, he actually seemed interested in talking. He told me about a new client, about some deal he was working on, and for a moment I felt this flicker of hope that maybe we could fix this, that maybe I could stop this stupid game and we could actually work on our marriage. Then his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He glanced at it, and his whole face changed, softened, and I knew without looking that it was a message from Isabel. "Work stuff?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Yeah," he said, but he didn't meet my eyes. "Just a client." I excused myself and went upstairs to our bedroom, locked the door, and opened my own phone. The message from James to Isabel said, "Thinking about you today. Hope the shoot went well." There was a heart emoji. A fucking heart emoji. That's when I realized I wasn't playing a game anymore. This had become something real, at least for James. He was falling for her, for a woman I'd created out of pixels and algorithms and my own twisted curiosity. I should have felt victorious, like I'd proven something about his character or our marriage, but instead I just felt sick. But I didn't stop. I wish I could say I was the bigger person, that I pulled the plug and saved us both from what was coming, but I didn't. I kept it going. Through September and into October, the messages got more intense. James told Isabel things he'd never told me, or at least things he hadn't told me in years. He talked about feeling stuck, about wondering if he'd made the right choices in life, about feeling disconnected from his family. Isabel listened. She validated his feelings. She told him he deserved to be happy, that life was too short to settle. All the things that people say when they're trying to justify bad decisions. He started making excuses to go into the city more often. Said he had client dinners, networking events, meetings that ran late. I played the dutiful wife, told him to be safe, to text me when he got there. Then I'd go upstairs and message him as Isabel, tell him I was in Manhattan for the week working on a project, ask him if he wanted to meet for a drink. He'd make up some excuse about why he couldn't, but I could tell he wanted to. He'd ask for a rain check. He'd say next time for sure. Halloween came and went. The kids dressed up, Chase as some character from a video game I didn't understand, and Olivia as a dead bride, which felt a little too on the nose given the state of my marriage. James took them trick-or-treating in the neighborhood, while I stayed home and handed out full-sized candy bars because that's what you do in Greenwich if you don't want the other parents talking about you. When they came back, James was on his phone, smiling at the screen. I wanted to grab it and throw it in the fucking fireplace. By November, I was spending hours every day maintaining the illusion, creating new photos of Isabel, responding to James's messages, keeping the story consistent. It was like having a second job, except this job was destroying my marriage, and I was the boss, and the employee, and the product, all at once. My sister, Rebecca, came to visit for Thanksgiving, and immediately knew something was wrong. We were in the kitchen preparing dinner, just the two of us, and she cornered me by the wine fridge. "What's going on with you?" she asked, her voice low so James and the kids wouldn't hear from the other room where they were watching football. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "I'm fine," I said, but my hands were shaking as I poured myself another glass of Pinot Noir. "Vicky, you're not fine. Is it James? Is he having an affair?" I almost laughed at the irony. "It's complicated," I said, which was the understatement of the century. Rebecca grabbed my arm and made me look at her. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm your sister. I'm not going to judge you."
But I couldn't tell her. How do you explain to someone that you created a fake woman on the internet and your husband fell in love with her and you can't figure out how to stop it without destroying everything? So I just shook my head and said I was tired, that work was stressful, even though I didn't have a job anymore, not since the kids got older and I decided to be a full-time mom, which really just meant I had more time to obsess over how empty my life had become. December arrived, and with it came the holiday season and all the forced cheer that entails. James and I hosted our annual Christmas party, invited all his colleagues and their perfectly polished wives, served expensive champagne and catered hors d'oeuvres, smiled and laughed and pretended we were happy. I watched James all night,
watched him check his phone every chance he got, watched him step out onto the terrace in the freezing cold to send messages he didn't want anyone to see. I knew he was texting Isabel. I knew because I was the one receiving them, my own phone buzzing in my clutch as I made small talk with Simone Harrison about her latest renovation project. The messages were different now, more urgent. "I need to see you," James wrote. "This is crazy, but I can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet?" I had Isabel respond that she was traveling for work but would be back in New York in January. "We'll make it happen then," she promised. "I feel the same way." On Christmas morning, James gave me a diamond bracelet that probably cost more than most people's cars. I gave him a Rolex he'd mentioned wanting. We opened presents with the kids, drank mimosas, ate the brunch I'd ordered from that expensive place in town, and the whole time I felt like I was watching my life from outside my body. Olivia asked if I was okay, and I told her I was just tired. Chase was too absorbed in his new PlayStation to notice anything was wrong. James was on his phone. New Year's Eve, we went to a party at the country club, another one of those obligations that came with our zip code and tax bracket. At midnight, when everyone was kissing their partners and toasting to new beginnings, James kissed me dutifully on the cheek, and I saw him glance at his phone right after. "Happy New Year," he said, but he wasn't saying it to me. Not really. January arrived, and I knew I was running out of time. James had been pushing to meet Isabel in person, and I'd been putting him off with excuses about work and travel and timing, but I couldn't keep it up forever. I started having panic attacks, waking up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, unable to breathe. I'd go to the bathroom and stare at myself in the mirror, at this woman I barely recognize anymore, and wonder what the hell I'd done. Then, on a Friday afternoon in mid-January, James came home early from work. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read a book, but actually scrolling through the messages between him and Isabel, trying to figure out my next move. He walked in looking nervous, which was unusual for James, who was always confident to the point of arrogance. "We need to talk," he said, and my stomach dropped. "About what?" I asked, even though I knew. I fucking knew. He sat down across from me at the kitchen island, ran his hair through it that way he does when he's stressed. "I haven't been honest with you," he said, "about a lot of things, about how I've been feeling, about us." I waited, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribcage. This was it. He was going to tell me about Isabel. He was going to confess everything, and I was going to have to pretend to be shocked and hurt when really I'd orchestrated the whole thing. "I met someone," he said, and even though I was expecting it, the words still hit like a punch to the gut. "Online. Her name is Isabel. We haven't met in person or anything, it's just been messages, but I think I have feelings for her. Real feelings." I should have cried. That would have been the normal response, but instead I just felt numb, hollow. "How long?" I asked. "Since the summer," he said. "I know it's wrong, I know I'm an asshole, but I can't help how I feel, Victoria. We haven't been happy in years, you know that." "So this is my fault?" I heard my voice getting louder, but I couldn't control it. "You're having an emotional affair with some woman on Instagram, and it's my fault because I haven't been happy enough for you?" "That's not what I'm saying," he said, but his tone was defensive. "I'm trying to be honest here. I'm trying to do the right thing." The right thing would have been to work on our marriage instead of falling for some stranger online. Have you even thought about the kids, about what this would do to them? "Of course I've thought about the kids," he snapped. "I think about them every day, but I also think about the fact that I'm 43 years old and I'm miserable, and I don't want to waste whatever time I have left pretending to be happy." We stared at each other across the kitchen island, years of resentment and disappointment and unspoken anger hanging in the air between us. Finally, James said, "I want a divorce." The words should have devastated me, but instead I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with absolute horror at what I'd done. I'd pushed him to this point. I'd created the other woman. I'd destroyed my own marriage with my sick little experiment. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "But you should probably know something about your precious Isabel first." He looked at me warily. "What?" And that's when I made the decision. I could tell him the truth right now, explain the whole thing. Maybe we could laugh about it or at least understand the absurdity of it. Maybe we could fix this before it was too late. Or I could let him have what he wanted. Let him walk away from this marriage thinking he was leaving me for someone better, someone more exciting, someone who understood him in ways I never could. Let him believe the fantasy.
Nothing, I said finally. I hope she makes you happy. He looked almost disappointed, like he'd wanted a bigger fight. That's it? He said. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, James? You've clearly made up your mind. He stood up from the table. I'll talk to my lawyer on Monday. We can figure out the details. Try to keep this civil for the kids' sake. Sure, I said. Civil. That's what we're good at. He left the kitchen and I heard him go upstairs, probably to pack a bag. I sat there alone with my phone in my hand, staring at Isabel's Instagram account, at this beautiful fake woman I'd created who'd somehow become more real to my husband than I was. I could delete her right now, make her disappear with a few taps of my finger. But I didn't. I wanted to see how far he'd go, how long it would take him to realize he'd fallen in love with a ghost. James moved out that weekend, got a place in the city, some luxury apartment in Tribeca with floor-to-ceiling windows and probably a doorman who didn't ask questions. He told the kids we were taking a break, that sometimes adults needed space to figure things out, all the bullshit explanations that don't actually explain anything. Olivia cried. Chase got angry and threw things in his room. I held them both and told them it would be okay, that we'd figure it out, even though I had no idea if that was true. My sister Rebecca came to stay with me for a few days after James left. She didn't ask too many questions, just brought wine and ice cream and sat with me on the couch while I pretended to watch TV, but really just stared into space. On the third night after we'd finished a bottle of Cabernet, she said, "Do you want to tell me what really happened?" I almost did, almost told her everything, but instead I just said, "He met someone else, or thinks he did." What does that mean, thinks he did? Nothing, I said. I'm just drunk. She let it go, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Rebecca's always been able to read me better than anyone, which is probably why I couldn't bring myself to confess. I didn't want to see the disappointment in her eyes when she realized what I'd done. The messages from James to Isabel continued. He was more open now, telling her about the separation, about how hard it was, but how sure he was that he'd made the right decision. "I feel like I can finally breathe," he wrote, "like I've been holding my breath for years and just now realized it." Isabel was supportive, understanding, said all the right things. I hated her, even though she was me. I hated him for falling for it. I hated myself most of all. February came, and James started pushing again to meet in person. "I need to see you," he wrote. "I need to know this is real." Isabel told him she was finishing up a project in Europe, but would be back in March. "Soon," she promised. "I want to meet you too." But I knew there could never be a meeting. Eventually, he'd have to figure it out. Eventually, this whole house of cards I'd built would collapse. I started losing weight, not eating, barely sleeping. My friends noticed, but I told them I was fine, just stressed about the separation. The truth was I was drowning in my own guilt and anger and the twisted satisfaction of watching James suffer for something that wasn't even real. In early March, James called me to discuss logistics about the kids' spring break. The conversation was civil, cold, the way divorced people talk when they're trying to be mature about things. At the end of the call, he said, "I'm meeting someone soon, someone important. I wanted you to know in case the kids mention anything." "Isabel?" I said, unable to help myself. He was quiet for a moment. "How did you know her name?" "I told you," I lied, "that day in January, remember?" "Right," he said, but he sounded uncertain. "Yeah, her. We're finally going to meet in person." "Good luck with that," I said, and hung up before he could respond. That night, I made a decision. It was time to end this.
I couldn't keep pretending to be Isabel, couldn't keep watching James fall deeper into this delusion I'd created. But I also couldn't just delete the account and disappear because he'd wonder what happened. He'd probably try to find her, maybe even hire a private investigator or something crazy like that. I needed to give him closure. I needed to give him the truth in a way that wouldn't destroy what was left of our relationship for the sake of our kids. So I crafted the final message. It took me 3 hours to write, delete, rewrite, delete again. Finally, I settled on something simple and devastating. James, I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say this except directly. I'm not who you think I am. This account, these photos, this entire persona is fake, created by AI. I'm so sorry for deceiving you. I never meant for this to go this far. Please don't try to contact me again. This account will be deleted. I hope you can forgive me and find genuine happiness. Goodbye. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before hitting send, watched the delivered notification pop up, then I sat there in my empty house, in the kitchen where James had asked for a divorce, and I waited. His response came 35 minutes later. What? This doesn't make sense. Why would you do this? Who are you really? I didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him spiral. Let him feel a fraction of what I felt watching him fall in love with someone who didn't exist.
He sent 15 more messages over the next hour. Angry, confused, desperate. Please talk to me. This isn't funny. I deserve an explanation. Who the fuck are you? I watched them come through, each one a little dagger of satisfaction and regret. Then I did what I should have done months ago. I deleted the Isabel Laurent account, erased her from Instagram, from the internet, from existence. 300,000 followers gone. Months of carefully crafted content vanished. The woman my husband had fallen in love with disappeared like she'd never existed at all, because she hadn't. James called my phone 2 hours later. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Again. Finally, I answered. "Victoria?" he said, and his voice was different, shaking. "Did you know about this? About Isabel?" "Know about what?" I asked, my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. "She's fake. The whole thing was fake. Some kind of AI account. I've been talking to a fucking computer program for 7 months." I let the silence stretch out, let him sit with it. "That's terrible," I said finally. "I'm sorry that happened to you." "I left you for her," he said, and now he was crying. James, who never cried, who prided himself on being stoic and controlled, was sobbing on the phone. "I walked away from my marriage, from my family, for someone who didn't even exist." "Yes," I said simply, "you did." More silence. I could hear him breathing, trying to compose himself. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means exactly what it sounds like, James. You were willing to throw away 16 years of marriage, 2 kids, a life we built together for some woman you'd never met in person, a woman who existed only on a screen. That's what you chose." "But she wasn't real," he said, his voice desperate. "It's not the same as if she was actually real." "Isn't it?" I asked. "You had real feelings. You made real choices. The conversations were real to you. The connection was real to you. Does it matter that she didn't exist if your feelings did?" He didn't have an answer for that. We sat on the phone in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Finally, he said, "Can I come home? Can we try to fix this?" And that's when I said the words I'd been holding on to since January. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, James. You can't come home. Not because of Isabel or whatever you think this was about. You can't come home because you wanted to leave. You wanted out. And the fact that the catalyst was fake doesn't change the fact that you were looking for an excuse. You were ready to leave me before Isabel ever existed." "That's not fair," he said. "You can't know that."
But I do know that, I said, because I know you, James. I've known you for 20 years, and I know that if it wasn't Isabel, it would have been someone else eventually. Some associate at your firm, some woman you met at a conference, someone real. You weren't leaving me for her, you were leaving me because you'd already left emotionally years ago, and you just needed permission to make it official. He was quiet again, and I knew my words had landed because they were true. We'd both known it for years, but neither of us had wanted to admit it. Our marriage had died a slow death of neglect and resentment and busy schedules and diverging paths. Isabel was just the bullet that put it out of its misery. "So what now?" he asked finally. "Now we move forward with the divorce. We figure out custody. We split our assets. We tell our kids that sometimes people grow apart and it's nobody's fault. We be adults about this." Is that what you want? I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I want to stay married to a man who'd been ready to leave me for a stranger? Did I want to spend the rest of my life with someone I'd had to trick just to get his attention? Did I want to save a marriage that required me to become someone else entirely just to make my husband feel something? "Yeah," I said, "that's what I want." We hung up shortly after that, and I sat alone in my kitchen with my phone in my hand, staring at the blank screen where Isabel's account used to be. I thought about telling him the truth, about confessing that I'd created her, that the whole thing was my twisted social experiment, but what would be the point? It wouldn't change anything. It would just shift the blame, make him angry at me instead of himself, give him ammunition in the divorce proceedings. And honestly, I didn't owe him the truth anymore. He'd given up that right when he'd fallen for a fantasy instead of fighting for his reality. The divorce took 6 months to finalize. We used the same lawyer, kept it as civil as possible for the kids' sake. James got the apartment in Tribeca, I kept the house in Greenwich. We split everything else down the middle, which ended up being a lot of everything considering how much we'd accumulated over the years. The kids adjusted better than I expected, or at least they pretended to. Olivia started seeing a therapist, Chase threw himself into sports. They split their time between houses, and I became one of those divorced moms who makes small talk at school pickup and tries not to cry in the parking lot. My sister Rebecca figured it out eventually. We were having lunch in the city about a week after the divorce was finalized, and she just looked at me across the table at some trendy restaurant in Soho and said, "You created her, didn't you?" I could have lied, but I was so tired of lying. "Yeah," I said. "Jesus Christ, Victoria," she said, but she wasn't angry. She almost sounded impressed. "That's the most psychotic thing I've ever heard." "I know," I said. "Why?" I thought about how to answer that. How do you explain that you created a fake woman because you wanted to see if your husband would fall for her? How do you explain that you needed proof that your marriage was already over before you could let it go? How do you explain that sometimes the only way to kill something is to show it what death looks like? "I needed to know," I said finally. "I needed to know if he'd choose her over me, over us, and he did." "But she wasn't real," she said. "She was real enough for him to leave, real enough for him to imagine a whole future with her, real enough to end our marriage. Sometimes I think the fake things are more powerful than the real ones because we can make them whatever we want them to be. No flaws, no complications, no messy reality getting in the way." Rebecca reached across the table and took my hand. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I will be, and I meant it." That was 3 months ago. Now it's late summer again, and I'm sitting in my house in Greenwich, the same house where this all started. But everything's different now. The kids are with James this week. I've started dating. Nothing serious, just testing the waters of being single again at 41. I've gone back to school, taking online courses in psychology, because turns out I'm fascinated by human behavior and manipulation and all the ways we lie to each other and ourselves. Who knew? Sometimes I think about Isabel, about the woman I created that never existed, but who changed everything anyway. I wonder if James thinks about her too, if he's embarrassed about the whole thing, or if he's convinced himself it was some elaborate catfishing scheme by a stranger and not the death rattle of his marriage. I wonder if he's told anyone about it, or if he keeps it locked away, too humiliating to admit.
I saw him last week when he picked up the kids. He looked tired, older somehow. He asked how I was doing, and I told him I was good, which was mostly true. We made small talk about Olivia's college applications and Chase's soccer team and the weather. Civil, cordial, like strangers who used to know each other intimately but can't quite remember how that felt. As he was leaving, he turned back and said, "Did you ever find out who was behind that Isabel account, the one I told you about?" I looked him right in the eyes and smiled. "No," I said. "I guess that's just one of those mysteries that never get solved." He nodded and got in his car and drove away, and I stood there in my driveway watching him go, thinking about all the ways we destroy the things we love, and all the ways love destroys us right back. I thought about how I'd created a perfect woman to prove my husband was imperfect, and how in the end I'd proven we both were. I thought about how easily we fall for illusions when reality disappoints us, and how sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone is give them exactly what they think they want. I never told him it was me. I probably never will, because the truth is, it doesn't matter who created Isabel Laurent. What matters is that he was ready to leave for her, for anyone, for anything other than the life we'd built, and I was ready to let him. I was ready to blow it all up just to see what would happen, to prove a point, to feel something other than the numbing disappointment of a marriage that had died years before either of us had the courage to admit it. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I'd done things differently. The honest answer is I don't know. I regret hurting my kids. I regret the collateral damage. I regret the months of deception and the psychological toll it took on me, the panic attacks and the sleepless nights and the constant anxiety of maintaining a lie. But do I regret exposing the truth of my marriage? Do I regret learning that my husband would choose a fantasy over reality? Do I regret getting out before I wasted any more years on someone who'd already checked out? No, I don't regret that. I go back inside my empty house and pour myself a glass of wine, expensive stuff that James left behind in the wine cellar. I sit on the couch in the living room where we used to watch TV together when we still pretended to like each other's company, and I open Instagram on my phone, my personal account, not Isabel's. I scroll through my feed past all the perfect lives and perfect families and perfect everything, and I think about how much of what we see is just carefully curated fiction. How many of these accounts are run by people who are just as lost and lonely and desperate as I was? How many of them are lying to themselves and everyone else about how fine they are? I think about creating another account, another perfect artificial person, just to see if I could do it again. Better this time, more careful. But then I put my phone down and drink my wine and look around at my life, at this real, messy, imperfect thing I'm building from the wreckage of my marriage. And I think maybe I've had enough of perfection. Maybe it's time to try being real for a change. The thing nobody tells you about revenge is that it doesn't actually make you feel better. It doesn't heal anything or fix anything or give you closure. All it does is prove that you were right about something you wish you'd been wrong about. James wanted to leave, and I gave him a reason to take it. I manufactured his escape route and then acted surprised when he took it. I played God with my own life and discovered that God doesn't actually have that much power after all. We make choices and we live with them, and we tell ourselves stories about why things happen the way they do, but in the end we're all just stumbling around in the dark trying to find something real to hold on to. I didn't make an AI influencer account to trick my husband. I made it to trick myself into believing that his leaving would hurt less if I'd orchestrated it. And maybe I was right, or maybe I was just another woman lying to herself about love and loss, and all the ways we sabotage our own happiness in the name of self-protection. Either way, Isabel Laurent is gone now. She existed for 7 months and destroyed a 16-year marriage and disappeared without a trace, which is exactly what I intended. She was beautiful,
and fake and perfect and meaningless, and she got exactly what she wanted, which was nothing at all. And me? I'm still here, in Greenwich, Connecticut, in this house that's too big for just one person, drinking expensive wine and wondering what the hell I do with the rest of my life now that I've burned down everything I spent 2 decades building. But at least I'm here. At least I'm real. At least I'm not pretending anymore that everything's fine when it's not, that I'm happy when I'm not, that my marriage was worth saving when it died years ago, and neither of us had the guts to admit it until a woman who didn't exist forced us to. So yeah, I made an AI influencer account and it got viral, and I used it to trick my husband, and he fell for it like the stupid idiot he was, falling for an AI woman instead of fighting for his real one. But the joke's on both of us, because in the end, we both got exactly what we deserved. He got his freedom, and I got mine, and the cost was everything we'd built together, and maybe that's just how these things go. Maybe some marriages are meant to end in fire instead of fading away slowly. Maybe some truths need to be forced into the light by artificial means. Maybe I'm the villain in this story, or maybe I'm the hero, or maybe I'm just another confused woman who made a terrible decision and has to live with the consequences. All I know for sure is that Isabelle Laurent taught me more about my husband in 7 months than 16 years of marriage ever did. She taught me that he was already gone long before he left. She taught me that I was capable of cruelty I didn't know I possessed. She taught me that the line between love and manipulation is thinner than I ever imagined. And now she's gone, and I'm still here, and that has to mean something. It has to mean that the real version of me, flawed and angry and vindictive and human, was strong enough to survive the destruction of my own perfect fake creation. It has to mean that sometimes you have to burn it all down before you can start building something true.
Or maybe it doesn't mean anything at all. Maybe I'm just a woman who created a fake person on the internet and destroyed her marriage for no good reason except that she was bored and angry and tired of pretending. Maybe there's no deeper meaning, no lesson learned, no redemption arc. Maybe this is just what happens when you have too much time and too much money and too little happiness and access to AI technology that can create beautiful lies. The sun's setting outside my window now, that golden hour light that Isabelle was always photographed in. And I'm sitting here alone in my big empty house with my glass of wine and my phone and my secrets, and I'm thinking that maybe this is what freedom looks like. Maybe this is what truth costs. Maybe this is just the price we pay for refusing to settle for comfortable lies. James is gone. Isabelle is gone. My marriage is gone. And I'm still here, figuring out who Victoria Ashford is when she's not someone's wife, not someone's creation, not performing happiness for the benefit of an audience. Just me, raw and real, and starting over at 41 with nothing but expensive furniture and a guilty conscience and the knowledge that I'm capable of things I never thought I'd do. And you know what? Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's more than enough. Maybe that's everything.